Hey everyone, welcome to the channel where we talk about all things movies. Welcome especially if you're new. If you love talking about movies and staying up to speed on what's in theaters and what's worth checking out, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my reviews when they drop. Alright, with that, let's get into this review. I just got back from seeing Watcher at the theater, so let's talk about it. Now, in this movie, a young American woman moves with her husband to Bucharest and begins to suspect that a stranger who watches her from the apartment building across the street may be a local serial killer decapitating women. My anticipation level going into this movie was pretty low. I think I've seen a trailer for it in front of recent films at the theater, but it wasn't really on my list. I just saw that it was playing this week, so I figured I'd go check it out. And with that, let's get into what I thought about the film. Now, to be clear, this will be a spoiler review. I feel like I can't really talk about this movie and express, my thoughts without going into spoilers. I think like I could, but what I want to talk about is very spoilery. So that's what we're going to do for this video. So if you haven't seen it, I will say I give this a letter grade of a B. I think it's a fun enough like thriller. But yeah, not something you have to go out and see. But if you're looking for something to see, I thought it was worth the watch. But with that, let's get into spoiler territory here. So first up, we'll just kind of, I think we'll kind of bounce around. I don't think we'll go character by character. It'll kind of progress through the story. But some generals of the things that I did like. I thought the cinematography was good as far as like the general look of the film and the locations. It was a very like clean look, and I did like the music. I thought it was pretty appropriate, and it had a good amount of music throughout, and the acting was also really good. Like I believe that all of these characters were who they were. But yeah, with that, let's get into kind of the story. So it starts off, and the two main characters are Julia and Francis, and they're a married couple that just moves to Bucharest, and they were both from the U.S. originally, although Francis's mother was originally from Bucharest. But they arrive and they're settling into their apartment, and Julia gets this notion that yeah, somebody across the street, like these are apartment buildings with like the biggest windows I've ever seen. You can just like look fully into somebody's apartment, and it's it's interesting because I feel like if I lived in an apartment like that, I would not have my like shades or blinds open nearly as much as most of those people do. But so she gets this notion that somebody across the street is looking at her. But I mean, it's I don't know. They're just standing in their window watching, doing the exact same thing she's doing. So it's interesting because she starts to get freaked out. But like, what are they doing that you're not doing? And my I just felt like she's being kind of very paranoid, and I'm like, well, typical thriller. The person's just making a big deal out of nothing, and they're gonna have us on the edge of our seat for the entire movie. And they do, but yet they don't because of the ending of the film. So things go on, and she like is very. I thought so. Kind of jumping ahead to when she goes into the theater. At this point, I'm just gonna assume that you've seen it, so I'm not gonna necessarily summarize the story. I'm gonna just bounce around. But she goes to the theater, and then she thinks this person has followed her in there. But we don't see them. At least I don't think we see them. We see like their foot, and in my opinion, we don't really know who followed her into the theater. And we don't even know that they followed her in there. Somebody sat down behind her after she sat down, and she thinks they followed her in there. So she leaves, and then she bumps into this random guy in the supermarket where she thinks he's following her around. But there again, they shoot the scene so well that I was fully convinced she was only being paranoid and this person wasn't following her. Like, he goes to the same aisle she goes to, and then like kind of as she leaves that aisle, he leaves, but then she goes to the other side of the store and he doesn't follow her there. And then like 30 seconds later, as she's like moving around trying to find him, she sees him again, and then she freaks out. So like in this situation, of the two, I think she's acting more stalkery than him because of her paranoia. And so it's just kind of ironic that she's behaving the way that she thinks he's behaving, and I think she's causing it. At least presents it as a possibility that she's the one like kind of just projecting this out there, and it's all in her head. But anyway, they get back and like yeah. So it was interesting. I think they all but confirm later on when she calls the police about this and they go and check. Her husband Francis basically says that it's him because he's like, even if you knew it was him, it like people live in the neighborhood. Like, you're gonna bump into your neighbors at the supermarket, so why does it matter? But that was, yeah. So again, you feel like my assumption is that she was just being paranoid and it was all in her head. And I could really relate with Francis on this note because he's like, he says she's acting crazy, and she's like, I'm like, you're saying I'm crazy, and he's like, well, I didn't really say that, but then he wants to help though, so I felt for him. I'm like, that must be a very difficult position for him to be in, and when he's like, what can I do? I thought it was a very realistic answer as well for her to say there's nothing you can do, because like she just wants him to be there for her and take her side, but it's already been made clear that he doesn't think that, or he thinks that she's just being paranoid. So there's nothing at this point he can do to like overturn that, short of going back in time, which just makes it for a very difficult situation. But that isn't helped though when he talks about this with his coworkers. Although who else is he going to talk about this with? Like, he just moved here with his wife. Still, like, it's a new atmosphere for him as well, even though he does know the language. But yeah, it's who else is he going to talk about it with? Because he can't talk about it with her because she's the one being paranoid. But I did think that was one nice thing about the film. I thought, while I can't personally relate, it depicts how I would imagine it would be and how difficult it would be to move to a new country where you don't speak the language. So I thought that was interesting. But another case in point of Julia being kind of stalkerish, she then deliberately follows this guy when she sees him leave again. I'm like, here again, like, you're the one being the stalker. You're following him to his work, and he, like, we don't even know that he followed you. Yeah, and like you're the one being the stalker. So it was, but yeah, it was great though when she gets the like boyfriend or whatever of her neighbor to go over to the other building and knock on the door for her. Of course they don't answer, and then again, like like she's just being paranoid and not acting logically. She then goes to the door herself. I'm like, if you're that paranoid of this person, why are you the one knocking on their door? But it was great to have that kind of come full circle and have them then report her for being like harassing them, and getting that handshake between the two. It was so like they just drop these clues that can be taken either way. You're like, very easily could this all just be in her head, but that is still like when does this actor not play a villain? Let's just throw that out there. So you're like, I just see him and think villain because that's all he ever plays. So are they just doing that kind of tongue in cheek in this, where he's actually just the person across the street, or is it going to turn out to be, that he is a killer? But I did like that they actually said they caught the spider, so it gives you kind of this false sense of security going into the finale, where I felt like I saw that coming. There are a couple things throughout the film that I don't well, before we get into the ending, there were definitely throughout the film I had like noticeable eye rolls by me and several like audible sighs, because I was like, oh, like she's just going through all the tropes of what you shouldn't do as a main character in a thriller movie when you're just like acting paranoid, like so many stupid things. But yeah, the first one wasn't really her, but it was when she has like the dream that she gets attacked, and I just kind of rolled my eyes because I'm like, of course it's a dream, and I saw that like within 5 seconds. I'm like, she locked the door and like barred it shut. Of course nobody's in here, so they didn't really get me on that front. But yeah, I forget what the others were specifically, but those, yeah, that happened kind of through a couple times throughout, and I was just like, so as the film went on, I didn't really enjoy those tropes, but by the end, how they kind of wrapped things up, I did, like, I don't know, I'm not sure like what it was that was satisfying about it, but it ended up being satisfying even though it seemed somewhat predictable, mainly because like it was one of the two predictable options, and they really didn't give us enough to go off of. Like, you kind of had to pick which one it was going to be, and I thought it was all just going to be in her head. I thought it was going to be lame if it was all just in her head and she was the one being paranoid. So I was happy that they went the route that they went with, where she was being paranoid, but she was also correct. And as that scene was playing out, I knew that well, first off, when her neighbor disappeared, I was very sure that she just disappeared, because like why would she leave her phone in her apartment? But there again, they did enough to establish like doubt where you could be like, well, she's not the most like reputable person, so maybe she got like wasted and went out somewhere without her phone, and that's why it's in her apartment and she's not there. So like they give you ways to rationalize all of these things throughout it. Although I knew like, and they, yeah, because they give the subtlest hint where the camera's on the closet when Julia breaks into her apartment, and it ended up being like the cat knocked over the lamp. You're like, okay. Although, how did the cat get in here? But yeah, they linger on the closet. And like, man, why is nobody checking out that closet? Like, yeah. And it turns out he was in the closet. I was like, I was 50-50. I'm like, somebody should go open that closet, but they don't. And then in the end, I knew that something was up because she comes out of her apartment after she hears the thud in the next apartment, or the music, whatever starts up to catch her attention. But she doesn't lock her apartment. And that was a huge key for me. I was like, okay, something, I assumed she was going to go over there, check it out, and then she was going to come back, and when she got back in her apartment, she was going to get attacked. So I didn't have the full thing, but I had remembered earlier on when she went over to visit her neighbor the first time and they were just having wine, that she locked her apartment when she went over there. So I was like, whew, she's just heading right over there. She's not locking her apartment. Something's going to happen. But that was, and like, another thing that I liked was the head in the bag on the subway. There, like, it's in the bag. It looks like a human face, but not so obviously, where you're like, okay, there are enough other objects that could be making that indent where if they go the direction that this is really just a normal person living next door, that's explainable and she's just being paranoid. But it still looks like the impression of a human head. And then it turned out to be a human head from her neighbor. So that was a little shocking to like just see the body there. And then yeah, it was he slit her throat so fast as well. As soon as she started to cry out for Francis to hear her, then yeah, she was dead. Although they did get me. I did think she was dead. And they did that in a really good way too, like showing how much of a psychopath he is to just want to look into her eyes as she's dying. But it was great how that gun came full circle and she's trying to get there but can't. And then he's stepping out and Francis sees him. I'm like, oh no, this is not going to go well. I fully expected the watcher or the neighbor to immediately kill Francis and then just leave the scene. So I was not expecting her to shoot him. But that was yeah, I don't know. It was an exciting finale, and it was like one you could see coming, but there are other possibilities. So I think that's what I liked about the film. And I would have been upset if they'd gone the route that she was just paranoid. I think what I would love to see off of this movie is just a follow-up of Francis. Like, I can't imagine having to sort out all that. Like, the fact that he just told her she was paranoid, although I think it was her paranoia that drove this guy to be interested enough in her to then eventually kill her. Like, I think if she hadn't even noticed him, she would be one of the many, many people in that apartment building. And I mean, sure, he was still a psychopath and there was a chance, but I think she put herself on his radar. So that was kind of unfortunate for that. But I'd love to see a kind of a character study of Francis for a little bit moving forward. Like, how does he sort through all of this? Because he did not believe her. He thought she was just paranoid. And then he sees this guy murdered and his wife just walk out with her, like, throat slit in front of him. After, like, basically, yeah, kind of, like, getting into a fight with her because he was... I mean, I do get kind of the need to talk to somebody about what he's going through, but still, like, that's your wife, and that's... I don't know. I think he still kind of crossed the line talking about that with his coworkers, but I get it. But, like, I can't imagine being him sorting through all of that. So, yeah, those are kind of my general thoughts, kind of all over the place, but those are the things that I really liked about the film in the end, and it was the final like act and how it all came together and the direction that they went. So that was the main thing that I wanted to talk about, and that's why we had to kind of go into spoilers for this review. But yeah, overall, it was, I think, the first 2/3 of the film, I wasn't very sold on it, and it was, I just assumed they were going to go the path that she was just paranoid and it was a bunch of cheap like thrills for nothing. But they bring it home and they give you the answer that for me was satisfying, even though it wasn't like completely out of left field, mind blown. It was one that brought the film to I thought, a worthy conclusion. So overall, this was a fun film for a thriller. I would give it a letter grade of a B. Mainly because, yeah, the first two acts were still a little slow and not all that engaging, and definitely has a lot of tropes in what the main character does as far as, tropes for thrillers. But I liked how they concluded it, and that's why I'd put it in the fun category. But yeah, if you've been able to see Watcher, I'd love to hear your thoughts, and if you kind of enjoyed it as much as me for the same reasons, or if you had your own reasons, or if you didn't really care for it, I'd love to hear about it in the comments down below. But yeah, with that, if you've enjoyed this review, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. Alright, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next review.